This video looks at the Rafael Nadal, Tomas Berdych men's Wimbledon final. Now, Rafa holds a 7-3 lifetime advantage over Berdych, and Berdych hasn't beat Rafa since 2006. Now, with that said, Berdych in 2010, well, he's been playing a lot better, made it to the semis of Roland Garros. Obviously, now he's in the final, had a good result in Miami, lost to Roddick in the final there. So he's playing a lot better. A lot of that has to do with his mental game. He's a lot more mentally tough, and he's not letting his opponents off the hook like he sometimes did in the past. Now, let's talk about the tactics I expect to see in this match. And we'll start with Berdych. What does he need to do to beat Rafa? Well, first of all, let's talk about the obvious stuff, the serve. Berdych needs to serve extremely well, and he needs to raise his first serve percentage a little bit. In the quarterfinals and then in the semis, he was in the high 50s, around maybe like 57%. Well, that needs to come up. I think it needs to be closer to 65%. And obviously, he still needs to be hitting big and hitting his spots. He can't let Rafa get his teeth into too many service games. Now, the second thing Berdych needs to do is really use his inside-out forehand well, but he needs to use it a little bit differently than he did against against Federer or Djokovic. And in the quarterfinals and the semis, he did a nice job of controlling the center of the court with the forehand, and he was hitting a lot of them inside out, and he generated some nice angles. So not only was he hitting them real hard, ball was moving through the court, he also was able to get some angle on the ball and really pull Djokovic, Federer off the court. Now, the problem for Berdych here is that, well, Fed, Djokovic, both righties. This is a righty's backhand over here. And particularly with Federer, the one-handed backhand, he's not going to be able to control that ball, as well as some other ground strokes. So Djokovic, even with the two hands, a lot of those balls are going to come back cross-court and not have a lot of, mustard on them, not be hit with a ton of authority. Well, this inside-out forehand is going straight into Rafa's lefty forehand. This is obviously a lefty's forehand over here. And Rafa hits with a ton of topspin. He's been getting great depth on his forehand. So with a guy like Djokovic or Fed, well, their replies off the backhand side would be landing maybe a little bit short, somewhere in here, and there wasn't great control in terms of hitting near the sidelines because they couldn't really go for the smaller areas of the court because they'd probably make an error. They had to send a lot of these back into the middle of the court, and again, in here, this is where Berdych is going to be able to control off of the forehand. Well, Rafa, not only is he going to get these balls back deeper when he goes down the middle, so he's going to push Berdych back a little bit, he also, if he gets a decent look, will be able to go line or pull this ball cross-court more effectively. So what ultimately is going to happen here is I think the efficacy of Berdych's inside-out forehand is going to be diminished a little bit because he's hitting into Rafa's best shot. So again, this inside-out forehand, got a ton of lines going on here now. This shot is not going to be as effective because, one of the things that makes Rafa's forehand so good is that he can hit it when he's not really set up. I mean, if you guys are tennis players at home, you probably implicitly know this, that when you're set up and you're balanced, you can hit a better shot than when you're on the run. Well, Rafa's reverse forehand kind of overcomes that limitation. He can be on the run and still hit ridiculous ground strokes because he's so strong with his upper body. So even if Berdych is able to pull Rafa off the court, Rafa's going to be able to do a lot with those ground strokes. So what should Berdych do to counter this? And my view is that while he shouldn't get away from the inside-out forehand, he should be way more inclined to go inside in. So when he gets a look on the forehand again in the middle of the court, he might want to send one over here, but it should set up going the opposite direction to Rafa's backhand. And I think when he gets into an exchange like that, he needs to do a nice job of then following this ball to net and force Rafa to pass him. And Rafa's going to come up with passes if Berdych uses this strategy, but he's just going to have to live with that, and he's going to have to convert enough points to to keep himself in the match and give himself a chance to win. So I think what I'm ultimately getting at here is Berdych needs to change direction off the forehand and not be as content to go inside out like he was doing against either a Federer or a Djokovic. Again, that goes to their backhands, which are, they're not going to be able to do as much with this shot as Rafa. Rafa into his forehand, he's going to be able to do a lot more. So Berdych doesn't want to get into protracted exchanges where he's blasting shots to Rafa's forehand. This is what Soderling tried to do. Obviously didn't work at Wimbledon, didn't work in the French Open. So Berdych needs to change direction a lot more frequently, I think, and try and keep Rafa off balance a little bit. If you look to a different guy on the tour, somebody who doesn't hit quite as hard as Berdych but changes direction really well, Davydenko, well, he's had success against Rafa using a similar strategy, moving the ball around the court, going corner to corner, keeping Rafa on the run. Davydenko does it a little bit differently than I would suggest Berdych tries to do it, but the general principle is still the same. So for Berdych to be able to execute this strategy, I think he needs to really stand up on the baseline and not allow himself to get pushed back. Now, Berdych has an advantage at 6'5". He's going to be able to stand up on the baseline and handle Rafa's high bouncing topspin shots. But one of the things that happened to Andy Murray when Rafa was playing him was Murray would drift back a little bit. The further back you get, well, the more you're going to be moving. If Rafa hits balls off the court, if you're on the baseline, you're making contact right about here. But if you get pushed back, then you're making contact right about there. So you've got this extra distance to cover. And over the course of several shots, well, you get further and further out of position. And particularly for a guy like Berdych, who is not nearly as good of a mover as someone like Andy Murray, he really needs to control and manage his lateral court positioning so he's not getting pulled back and forth like he's on a string, because when he doesn't have his feet set, well, then Berdych isn't going to be able to do nearly as much with the ball. Ultimately, what Berdych needs to prevent Rafa from doing is getting him on defense. As soon as Berdych goes on defense, the point's basically over. Berdych's D is clearly not his strong suit. Somebody like Murray in the semifinal was able to neutralize some rallies where he's on defense because Murray plays such great D. Well, that's not the case for Berdych, so Berdych basically needs to stay on offense the entire time because the point is going to be over if he ever gets pushed to D. So what I'm getting at with the strategy is high first serve percentage, you're on offense. Take charge with the forehand, you're on offense. Also go after Rafa's second serve, start a lot of those points on offense, because anytime he gets in a defensive situation, he's pretty much done. The way Rafa was playing against Murray, the guy is playing unbelievably well. If we kind of flip the script and look at this from Rafa's perspective, what does he need to do to win this match? Well, I think he needs to, we just talked about how Berdych wants to attack the second serve. Rafa needs to serve a high percentage to prevent Berdych from taking some cuts, because Berdych did come up with some really nice second serve returns against Federer and Djokovic. So Berdych is going to be looking to take big cuts there. Rafa needs to serve a high percentage to cut down on the number of looks that Berdych is going to get. Now, we also talked about how Berdych is going to be hammering those forehands into the corner over here. Well, Rafa needs to change direction like we talked about frequently and not put the ball in the middle of the court. This is when he's gotten himself in trouble against someone like Del Potro, when his directional control isn't where he wants it to be. When Rafa, again, leaves the ball here, particularly with that heavy topspin, high bouncing, this is when he really gets exploited by those bigger guys, when he can't keep him on the move. So Rafa needs to hit his spots corner to corner to get Berdych on the move, because like we talked about before, so as soon as Berdych is moving, then he's not going to be able to do nearly as much with the tennis ball. Now, I think what's a real nice strategy that Rafa uses, I think this is going to be very effective against Berdych, is let's say we've got a cross-court rally going on. Berdych, Rafa's forehand to Berdych's backhand. So we got a cross-court rally, outside ground strokes. You guys, as sort of aside, if you've seen our strategy mini-series that we recently released, you know that changing direction on outside ground strokes and going down the line is a lower percentage play. It's going to lead to more errors. The pros obviously do this because they're really good and they know when to pick their spots. So expect exchanges like this. Berdych is going to go line sometimes. Obviously, we could flip the script and say Rafa's backhand, Berdych's forehand, he's going to go line as well. But this scenario is going to apply to both sides. So let's say we've got this cross-court exchange, and then Berdych decides to go down the line. Rafa moves over here to hit it. Well, what we also talked about in the strategy mini-series is when your opponent's on this side of the court, you want to position yourself on this side. That's correct court positioning. If we move it back here, if your opponent's hitting here, you want to position yourself on this side when you're waiting for the ball. So what's going to happen is if Berdych goes down the line and Rafa goes over to hit it, well, Berdych is going to be moving to get to the other side of the court to cover the cross-court ball. And one of Rafa's favorite shots is to take a down-the-line shot and go right back down the line with it, because particularly against bigger guys, you got to get them to stop and then start again. You wrong foot them. And Rafa did this a lot against Murray, gave Murray fits. You better believe it's going to be more effective against Berdych, who, again, like we talked about, not as good of a mover. So this will apply on the backhand side. Of course, it's going to apply on the forehand side as well. If Berdych decides to go down the line, then Rafa, if he sees Berdych really moving to get to the correct recovery point, Rafa's going to take it down the line to wrong foot him. And Rafa, obviously, on the forehand side is going to be real effective with this. Finally, the thing I think Rafa needs to do is, and he did this against Murray, he's been doing it well the entire tournament, is transition from defense to offense. As soon as you get that short ball, not hit with quite as much authority, step in and really attack. And Rafa has been doing a great job of not only doing that in terms of moving up into the court, but also running around a lot of backhands, turning them into forehands. I mean, Rafa's been in the doubles alleys hitting forehands pretty frequently. He's been really aggressive getting around his forehand. That shot's been on. He's been hitting his spots with it. So he feels like he can give away a ton of court because he's hitting that shot so well. And I expect that to continue, and I expect him to use his forehand to really move Berdych around the court. So what exactly do I think is going to happen with this match? Well, my view on Rafa in the semis versus Murray was that Rafa played unbelievably well. It was one of the best performances I've ever seen out of him. Murray played great. He served somewhere around 75% for the first two sets, only lost 7 points in the second set on his serve, and he still lost that set and obviously lost in straights. And, Murray was playing great. Rafa was just giving him nothing. I think Rafa made somewhere around 13 unforced errors the entire match, against a guy like Murray who gets a lot of balls in play and makes you hit a lot of shots. Rafa just wasn't giving anything away, making no mistakes. So you're talking about a guy in, when Berdych is playing him, that puts a ton of pressure on him, Berdych, to come up with the goods. And I don't see that happening. I mean, one of the things, Berdych played great to beat Federer and beat Djokovic, but one of the things I didn't see out of Berdych, and that gives me a little bit of pause, is Berdych was always either even or he was ahead. He was never playing from behind. Now, earlier in the tournament, he was behind. He was down 2-1, I believe, against Istomin, came back and won that match. But that's earlier in the tournament. It's not against a Federer, not against a Djokovic, and it's not against a Rafa in a major final. So that is a question, in my mind, if Berdych gets down a set, loses the first set, how is he going to react? Is he going to say, oh, well, I'm playing Rafa, I'm in the Wimbledon final, it's just not my, it's not my time, and he kind of goes away. That happens to, players it happens to players of all stripes. They get down a little bit and they don't react well. I haven't seen, like I said, Berdych handle that kind of situation, and you better believe he's going to be behind at some point against Rafa. So I think that's a big question mark. But I think ultimately the level that Rafa is playing at is just, sky high right now, and I don't see Berdych being able to overcome that. I actually think this is going to be a pretty routine match for Rafa. I think he's going to win in straight sets. So we'll obviously find out tomorrow, but I think it'll be good. There'll be a lot of shot making in this match because again, Berdych has been playing well. I just think Rafa, his game is airtight right now. His defense is airtight. His offense is amazing, and he's transitioning so well to taking the initiative. When he has a look, I just think it's going to be too much for Berdych to handle. So again, Rafa in 3 sets. Now, you may have heard from a previous video, and you may be familiar with what we do at FYB on major finals. We have a live webcast during the match. So if you're watching the Wimbledon final on your television or on your computer, please log on to our website, fuzzyyellowballs.com, and we have that live webcast, that live broadcast where we comment on the match. We can diagram plays on the dry erase board, and it's just a lot of fun. We have a chat box so we can interact. We'll be giving away a bunch of cool free prizes. And of course, Ian Westerman of EssentialTennis.com, he's back joining me for the broadcast. So I'm really looking forward to having him back. Again, we had a bunch of fun doing the French Open, the Aussie Open, and I'm really looking forward to it. So if you are watching the match, please join us again, fuzzyyellowballs.com. Just go to the website. The video player will load up first thing during the match, so it'll be real easy to find. But we hope to see you if you're watching the match. So yeah, see you in about 12 hours or so.
Did you know that there are only 5 simple things you need to do to have a textbook forehand like Roger Federer? If you click the link in the description of this video and visit our website, you'll learn why Federer's forehand is so good and how you can copy his technique. And this entire 45-minute lesson is 100% free. Join the thousands who have already learned what these 5 simple things are and take control of your forehand today.